Okay, so in the last part, we've seen product backlog, and we've seen sprint backlog. They are two documents we use to track the progress of our work. And now let's look at what meetings we have using Scrum. Okay, and specifically these are the meetings inside a Scrum. So there are 4 kinds of meetings to take place inside every sprint. Sprint, for the beginning, we have a planning meeting, and then every day we have a daily Scrum meeting. And then at the end, we have a sprint review meeting and sprint retrospective meeting. And in computing, when you see asterisks, we use asterisks to mean repetition. Okay, when next year, if you learn regular expressions from my course, then you see that if you want to repeat something, you use asterisks to show that we are repeating this. So in a sprint, 1, 3, 4 will happen just once, but daily Scrum meeting will happen multiple times, once every day. And for you, because we assume that you're taking 3 other courses on top of this one, so you may not have enough progress every day. So in your case, you can adopt the daily Scrum meeting to become a weekly meeting or twice weekly meeting. Okay, so you can do a little bit of adaptation for your project, so that each person can have half a week to do something. So let's look at what is the sprint planning meeting. First, you need to start with a product backlog with the status updated. So what task has been finished and what task has what user stories has not been finished. Then that product backlog should show that. And of course, now you will take a few high priority user stories from it, and if the acceptance criteria have not been written, then you better write it, because we need the acceptance criteria to know how much work it is. Because the acceptance criteria really give more details to the user stories. And now you break up each PBI into multiple tasks, and then one task would be assigned to a team member. And estimation of how much time to do a task is always difficult, not only for you as a student, even for experienced people is a very hard thing. Okay, so how can you do a meaningful estimation? Okay, so I think actually is good for your team. Okay, so pretend you're the team, you're applying sprint right now. You have chosen a user story to do, then you identify the task, and each person, I hope you would like participate in discussion, and then each person think for each task how much time it will take for you to finish. Then write it down on a piece of paper, and then you go through the task one by one, and you'll find out some people may give a very large estimate for a task, same task. Some people would give a very low estimate. Some people would give a very large estimate. So you can have some discussion. The person at the high end can explain why I think it's difficult, why I think it takes more time. And then the person who gives a small estimate will say, oh, why I think it's easy. So this sort of discussion may help your teammates to understand the amount of work better. So you can go through some discussion to do the estimation, okay, and then based on the estimation, you can decide which PBIs you can complete in this new sprint, because we are doing this at the beginning of each sprint. We are planning what we want to accomplish in the sprint, and it depends on a good estimation. And also, how many tasks do you break down to? Okay, you don't write many tiny small tasks. So if the task is too small, if every half an hour you make it a task, then you're going to have many hundred tasks to manage. That would be too much. But if a task require 3 months effort, then by the time it's finished, like we're already Christmas. So you want to manage the task size to be roughly half a week or 1 week if you're doing it part-time, okay? With full-time employee, I would suggest keeping a task within 3 or 4 person day would be about right, okay? So don't make it too big. It would be not very useful, but too small and it's too tedious, too much trouble to keep track of them. And so the planning meeting with the acceptance criteria and going through the estimation process, the team members can better understand the requirements, how much work is involved, and what are the challenges that they see, okay? And then maybe they can produce some UML diagrams, some design diagrams. We'll learn that later in the course. And the meeting probably would last 2 to 4 hours. And it should be attended by the entire team, including someone representing the customer. Okay, so that was the planning part. You need to have a good planning at the beginning. Now, every day, every morning, there's a famous stand-up meeting. Stand-up meeting means the good thing about stand-up meeting is you don't need to book a meeting room. Like you can find several people can just stand around a cubicle, okay, and discuss it. And part of the reason to do a stand-up meeting is because you are holding this meeting every day, so you don't want to spend too long. And usually 15 minutes, okay, 15 minutes is about the right length of time you want to do. And what will you discuss? Well, someone probably would do the recording, and the team members will report, what did I do yesterday? And what will I do today? And if there are problems, obstacles that stop me from finishing the work I planned for today, okay? And for this to work, team members need to be very honest, because if someone tries to hide their weaknesses, hide their problem, they cannot hide forever. And it will only cause delay of the project, and your team members cannot help you on anything, right? If you try to hide the problem. So you need to build trust, you need to be honest to your team member, and if you have trouble, then you need to speak up. But still, is this the best question to ask or to answer? Okay. Some people suggest that the way questions originally phrased here, because people were afraid to show themselves as a weak member. So by saying that what I did, so people may want to boast, like may pretend that they have accomplished a lot to make themselves look good, right? What did I do yesterday? Or they say blah, 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 lots of great things to try to pretend they are good. And when it comes to problems, well, they also want to pretend to be good and then do not tell the truth. So some people suggest to rephrase the question a little bit to remove the I or the me from the question. So this way, people perhaps will more openly discuss the status. For example, what has been done on this particular PBI yesterday. Okay, so we are focusing on the matter or the event or the activities, not the person. Okay, so 我哋係嘗試針對事而唔係針對人嘅時候咧，或者我哋會比較開放一啲啊，冇咁太過話即係太過驚啊，要扮到好叻啊，又或者要收收埋埋啲弱點咁樣。Okay. So what will be done to the PBI today and by whom? Okay. So we make sure that everybody has the right amount of work to do today, and nobody would be standing here not doing anything. Okay, waiting for someone. Okay, so we make sure that someone gets something to do today, fill up the day, and try to identify obstacles to prevent the completion of the planned day, planned work. And we don't want the meeting to be dominated by one or two persons. Okay, and also we said, do you remember how long this meeting should be? How long? Half an hour? 1 hour? 15 minutes? 15 minutes, right? I just said it earlier. Well, so 15 minutes is not a very long time. So if you really have problems, you may at best brainstorm a little bit, but you do not try to solve all the problems in the stand-up meeting. You take it offline. That means if it concerns one or two person, that one or two person will try to fix it after the meeting. But this meeting is just to let everyone knows what we are dealing with. Okay. So that was the daily Scrum meeting. If at the end of a sprint, okay, then the work that you have done are ready to be demonstrated. Okay, so you would ask the user representative to come and look at the demonstration to make sure that everyone agree, okay, on the team, of course, especially the customer representative, that all the acceptance criteria are met. Remember, acceptance criteria, we said we don't do lots of written documentation, but the acceptance criteria, we would have it written down. So we would go through the list to make sure that it's meeting that criteria. Okay. At this point, we have actually been using this name. I guess we've seen this name called Scrum Master. We'll talk a little bit more about those roles, but just think of Scrum Master as some sort of facilitator, okay, to help team members to do their work. And PO stands for Product Owner, okay. Well, again, we'll talk more about this role later. The Product Owner and other stakeholders would come and attend this sprint review meeting and give feedback. So they will say whether they have the final say whether the acceptance criteria have been met. And maybe at this point, if the product owners see new user stories, he or she can add things to the product backlog. Okay, so the product backlog is a list that has a list that you can modify from time to time. Okay, so in general, the product owner he really represents the user, represent the customer. They can change the requirements. Okay, but we just ask them not to change it in the middle of a sprint. So at the end or at the beginning of a sprint, they can change, okay? But they don't try to do that in the middle of a game, okay, of a sprint. Okay, and every several sprints, you probably want to release the software to the users for their actual use. And this meeting should last 1 to 4 hours. So here we say that all the new features, all user stories, they should be fully tested. Okay, so we use a term called shippable. Okay, shippable, shippable. That means the features, the software actually is ready to be shipped to the customer. Okay, for them to use, shippable. But shippable doesn't mean we have to ship it, because imagine if the software, if the sprint size is 1 week, if every week the user actually see a slightly different products, okay, then it will be a little bit confusing to them. So even though the features are ready, we probably would group several sprints together to release a new version. Okay, so for example, when let's say whether we're using a Windows or Mac OS, actually every day probably they have done some change to their version of OS and compile it and test it, but they do not give you an update every day, because that would be a little bit confusing to you. Okay, so they group them together to give one to you like every several weeks maybe, okay, or several months. Okay. And then this is the last meeting. The name looks almost the same: sprint review meeting and sprint retrospective meeting. The difference between the two meetings is the review meeting focus on the software products that you're producing for the customer, but the retrospective meeting focus on the process, how the team members are working together, how the communication is happening between the product owner and the team member. We want to, so the two meetings has different focus. One is about how development team work together. Okay, the other one focus on the software products. Okay, because for example, maybe let's say the product owner is not on site enough. Maybe you try to call them, maybe the product owner does not return call after 2 days, 3 days. So you can maybe because the product owner is not available to answer the developers' questions, it slows things down. So which meeting do we discuss this problem? Okay, we discuss it in the sprint retrospective meeting, because this is about the process, how people work. Okay, but let's say if a certain acceptance criteria is not met, then it is raised in the review meeting. So the two meetings focus on different things. Okay, this one is for the process, and software engineering, we try to see if we can measure something. Okay, for example, I mentioned about the turnaround time to clarify a requirements. Maybe we want to measure the average time that the product owner answer our questions. Okay, ideally, the product owner should be on site and should give instantaneous. But let's say if it's not happening, then you want to do some measurement. You want to track. Maybe it's always over a day, and the waiting time would slow down the progress, okay, of the programmer. So we identify that, we measure that, and if we ask the boss to tell the product owner, the PO, give priority to this project, so be more responsive, give answer back quickly. Then we can go measure and see if that 2 days turnaround is shortened to 1 day. Okay, so we can see if there are any improvement. And so you can roughly see the idea of planning, doing something, checking, acting. So we check the progress. Okay, so let's take a short 3 minutes break.